We have a multitude of personalities because we are not just one fixed thing or energy all the time. We have so many different parts in our psyche that take turns. So these different parts come out at different times. And those parts of ourselves that we feel the most ourselves when expressing, those are the parts that we want to exercise the most. And those other parts that we don't care for, those parts that feel so undesirable and so repulsive, the parts of ourselves that we feel so repulsed by, those are the parts that really need our love. Those are the parts that really need us to integrate them. Because if we don't integrate them, we are not creating a sustainable relationship with ourselves, which means that we're not going to be in sustainable relationships with anything in the outside world, because everything starts with our relationship with ourselves. So that is the foundation, that's the baseline. And a lot of the times what happens when you get into a romantic partnership is these parts that have not been honored or acknowledged start to come to the surface. And this is what we call shadow work. I really do love the term parts work, honestly, because you are working with different parts of your psyche. Yes, they can feel shadowy, and yes, it is shadow work. And also, there are different ways to approach it. So it's whatever resonates for you. Parts work feels good to me because it really is the process of reclaiming certain parts of yourself, loving and honoring certain parts of yourself, especially those parts of you that feel very childish. So as we're developing as humans, in whatever environment we grow up in, a lot of the times there are parts of us that don't feel accepted, that don't feel heard, that don't feel seen, that feel shamed or shameful. And so what we do is we repress those parts and we kind of keep them locked in this little metaphorical box inside of us. And we're like, oh, no one can see that. We don't even know it's there a lot of the time. So when we're in relationships, these parts of us can come out and then they can manifest as being super needy or super jealous or super territorial, or going into victim consciousness. So these parts start to come out and play and weave into our day-to-day experience until we really integrate them. And that is part of this healing journey, is getting really intimate with your own parts and inviting them back into the overall oneness, wholeness of you. Because what happens is throughout our human journey, if certain parts of us didn't feel like they were allowed to be or allowed to be embodied or allowed to express themselves, then those pieces of our consciousness. So think about it as just one, you have this consciousness and think about it as this beautiful rope, right? This beautiful rope is your consciousness in its full integrity. And what happens throughout your human journey is little knots get tied in the rope. And those knots get tied when you don't feel safe to express certain parts of your consciousness or yourself. And you're like, oh, okay, that one's not acceptable, so you tie a knot. And so this process of healing is a process of untying the knots so that your rope can be in full integrity again, so your consciousness can be really whole again. So these pieces of your consciousness, these knots get tied and your consciousness fragments when you don't feel like you're allowed to be this or say this or embody this part of you. So going into that, this is so dynamic because there are infinite parts. There are so many parts that make us who we are. And those aspects that have been repressed, sometimes it takes some digging to really get to them. And it takes rigorous honesty and deep moral inventory of yourself, getting really radically honest about where these feelings, where these knots are. So some examples of that could be, some knots in your rope could be intense feelings of jealousy. Intense feelings of jealousy and insecurity. That jealousy and that insecurity is stemming from someplace. It's stemming from one of your parts that does not feel safe or seen or heard. And so it manifests as the energy of jealousy. It doesn't mean that you're just inherently a jealous person. There's no one size fits all label that labels you, right? You're a dynamic, multifaceted, multidimensional being, and you have a multiplicity of parts. So that's just one aspect of you. So another aspect could be intense neediness, right? That comes from a similar place, but that might be a different part, the part of you that didn't get the love you needed as a child in your immediate environment, and that creates a feeling of unease and a lack of safety within that part. So the process of parts work is really identifying which part, especially the part that feels the most knotted, right? The part that keeps repeating itself. Which part of you is coming to surface the most? Because that's going to be the most prevalent part. So you want to look at that one first. The one that's really trying to get your attention is the one you want to look at the least. And when you do look at it and recognize that it is just a part of you, the energy of it starts to dissipate. The reason it feels so big and magnanimous is because it's trying to get your attention, and it's scared. It's scared. It's a part of you that is so scared. And so this process of parts work is putting on, being the person that part needed at whatever stage of development it didn't get its needs met. So really meeting the needs of that part. And when we don't do this, we start to look to other people to meet those needs for us, primarily our romantic partner. Our romantic partner is the first place that we turn to get these needs met. And then when they're not meeting the needs, a different part will come online and be like, oh, this is not my person. Oh, this isn't meant to be. Oh, this person can't handle me. And, discernment is key here, because sometimes you're not supposed to be in certain relationships. Or it's run its course and you get to learn the lesson from that relationship. But the purpose of relationship and the reason that we attract the people that we do into our lives is to be a mirror into the parts work, is to be a mirror into the fragmented aspects of our consciousness that wish to be integrated so that we can be full, integrated humans. And so that we can learn and evolve in this journey of unconditional self-love, because it really does take that unconditional love for self to look at these aspects, to look at these parts, because there are so many different parts saying so many different things. So this is also where I just learned this term recently. Metacognition comes in, the ability to observe your cognition, your mental construct of what's going on in your mind, and to compartmentalize and be like, oh, this part's talking right now. Okay, that's my victim. Okay, what does my victim need to feel empowered? How can my empowered part come in and meet the needs of my victim? And how can they have a dialogue so that I can be back in my empowered state, and so that the victim isn't bringing me down into this heavy energy, right? Because then if your victim's bringing you into heavy energy, your victim is most likely going to manifest in the external and it's going to bring other people into that sticky energy, and that's your responsibility. Your responsibility is keeping your rope, your consciousness in integrity, is your vibration. And I mean, I'm speaking into this. I am not perfect with this. This is a constant practice, a constant returning to that original integrity, that core self, and doing this inner work. And it does take practice, and it takes patience, and it takes love, a lot of love. It is the journey of really loving and honoring yourself so that you can really show up and love and honor those around you, those in their journeys, on their path, right? We all have a different path. We all have a higher power, and something that is just, it's such a beautiful reminder to lean into the letting go. Just letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. See, I don't know where this is going. Usually this is where I would stop it. I totally just lost my train of thought. Just remembering that we all have a higher power. We all have a path that we're walking, and each one of our journeys is so different. Our responsibility really is the keeping our own energy in integrity, emotional integrity, spiritual integrity, soul integrity, just integrity, like being in our heart, remaining in our truth, remaining true to ourselves, speaking and living from a place of authenticity. That's our only job. And to allow love, allow source, divine, divinity, consciousness, God to move through us, to be a vessel for source. And when we do this, we can remember that each person has their own higher power, has their own vessel that's being moved through by source. So it's so empowering to remember that you have no control over people, places, and things. And that might feel a little scary sometimes because, you know, our ego is like, oh, but I want to control it. Like, this is my way or the highway. And it's like, no. It's not. It's not. And that's where our suffering comes from, is needing it to go a certain way or wanting it to be our way or trying to control other people when they've got a higher power that is working with them. We are not people's higher power, and our partners are not our higher power. Nobody outside of us is our higher power. So this is where we get to come back to these different parts and go, oh wait, okay, but I can be and work with my higher power in the restoration of these parts so that I can show up in that wholeness, so that I can interact with other people from that space of wholeness, so that I'm not seeing people and seeing the world through my wounded parts, through those parts that are getting no love. Because that just starts to distort your reality, and it starts to just create this like loop of shadowy energy, and that's why we call it shadow work, until it gets your attention and you sit down and you do the work, or you move through the work. And the work looks different for everybody. For some people, it can be, you know, going into these different spaces through meditation or through journaling or through embodiment practices, through hypnosis. These are all things that I work with my clients or use to facilitate and hold space for my clients to really integrate all of these different parts. But the process of bringing these parts to light and integrating them is your awareness of them. Your awareness is the light. Your awareness from a non-judgmental place, from a place of love, is the healing. That's the healing. And then the integration is meeting those needs for yourself, is making amends where needs be, is taking action on those things that you've been putting off. It's stepping back into your own sovereignty, your empowerment, taking control of your life, taking ownership of your life, of you, of your life force. This is the only thing that you have control over. So, yeah, it's really exciting because then you remember that the power is always in your hands, and it's not a malevolent power. It is a deeply benevolent power. The universe is benevolent, and it's up to us to start to develop these parts so that we can operate from a space of love and benevolence and be that for other people, and to, you know, because when we're in integrity with our soul, we start to speak to the soul in the other person rather than the personality. Because what happens in this experience, in this human journey, is our personalities are interacting with each other and triggering each other because there's so much work to do, because our parents didn't have these tools and their parents didn't have these tools. And so we come from a long lineage of people who didn't have these tools and who didn't do the work and who didn't implement these modalities and this deep healing So we are the transitional characters that are here to stop these patterns from recycling in our generation, so that when we give birth to our children and they give birth to their children, they're not spending their entire lives trying to heal from the baggage that their parents didn't heal. And this is also where we develop and cultivate radical compassion for our parents and the journeys that they were on and what they went through and where they were when they had us. Because yes, a lot of us grew up in dysfunctional homes, but our parents had so many wounded parts that they didn't know how to tend to. They didn't have the tools, and quite frankly, if we look at it from a spiritual perspective, they weren't the ones to do this work. We are. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this work. That's why we're birthing this new paradigm. We are co-creating a new earth, and that all starts within us.